From humble beginnings to an empire of blood and death, how did Vito Corleone transform from an innocent young boy into one of the most feared mob bosses in New York? Let's find out in Mafia. He entered the church but left with blood. The old church stood tall against the unforgiving New York skyline, a beacon of hope and solace for many. It was here that young Vito Corleone found comfort after his father's untimely demise. His world had been shattered into a million pieces, and the only thing holding them together was his mother, his fierce love, and the promise of a better future. But Vito knew it wouldn't be easy. He was just a poor Italian immigrant, trying to make his way in a city that was as unforgiving as it was alluring. However, despite the hardships they faced, there was always the Don Vito's father, who had instilled in his son the importance of family and respect. A man who does not respect his elders is a man who won't last long in this life, he had told Vito when he was just a boy, his words echoing in Vito's ears, even now. And his father had also taught him the value of money, how it could buy power and influence. As Vito grew older, he realized that his father's absence left a void not just in their home, but in the entire community. The other immigrants looked up to Vito Sr., and now they were looking to Vito. At just 17 years old, Vito was thrust into a world of organized crime, a world where respect was earned through fear and power, a world where money was everything. Vito's journey to the top began in earnest. He rose quickly through the ranks, impressing the other mob bosses with his cunning and ruthlessness. His ambition was matched only by his ability, and soon he became known as the most feared mob boss in New York. But as his power grew, so did his enemies. Rival gangs and the police were constantly at his heels, and Vito knew that he couldn't win in the long run if he didn't have allies. That's when he decided to pay a visit to the local church, an unlikely ally in his war for dominance. Vito wasn't a religious man, but he knew that the church had a lot of influence over the people of New York, and he was hoping that he could use that influence to his advantage. When he approached the priest, Father Melfi, he wasn't sure what to expect. But the priest surprised him by agreeing to meet with him. In the dimly lit confessional, Vito laid out his plan. He wanted the church to help him launder money, and in return, he would protect the church from the other gangs. Father Melfi was a shrewd man, and he knew that he couldn't refuse Vito's offer. If he did, the other gangs would likely target the church anyway. So he agreed to the arrangement, and Vito kept his word. He used his influence to keep the church out of harm's way, and in return, the church helped him launder millions of dollars. It seemed like a perfect arrangement, but it wasn't, because as Vito's power grew, so did his arrogance. He began to flaunt his wealth, throwing lavish parties and buying expensive cars and clothes. He became the talk of the town, and not in a good way. People were starting to notice his excesses, and they were suspicious that he was involved in illegal activities. Vito didn't care. He was used to living in the shadows, and he was tired of it. He wanted to be someone who could walk down the street without fear of being arrested. And he thought that he could achieve that status if he had enough money. But Vito had made powerful enemies during his rise to power, and they were watching him closely. As soon as they saw an opportunity to bring him down, they pounced. One day, Vito was driving down the street when he was surrounded by police cars. He was arrested and charged with a series of crimes, including racketeering and extortion. Vito was shocked. He had never been arrested before, and he didn't know what to do. He was thrown into a cell with a bunch of other criminals, and he was scared. For the first time in his life, Vito was afraid. But he knew that he couldn't let his enemies see him as weak. So when one of the other inmates tried to make him breakfast, Vito refused to eat it. "I don't want your charity," he said. But the inmate just laughed at him. "You don't want my charity? Then get ready for the special welcome we have for you," he said, his eyes flashing with malice. Before Vito could react, the other inmates started closing in on him, their faces twisted with a hunger that chilled him to the bone. They were going to force him to eat their way, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. But just as things seemed darkest, the cell door opened, and a guard walked in. "Corleone," he said, his voice booming, "you have a visitor." Duh. Vito turned around and his heart skipped a beat. Standing in the doorway was Father Melfi, a small smile playing on his lips. "I brought you some breakfast, Vito," he said, holding out a basket. Vito hesitated, then took the basket and started eating. "Thank you, Father," he said, his voice hoarse. Father Melfi nodded. "Don't mention it, Vito. Now, how are you holding up?" he asked, his voice soft. Vito shrugged. "I'm fine," he said, but the lie was transparent. Father Melfi knew Vito was struggling, but he also knew that Vito was strong, and he believed that Vito would come out of this ordeal stronger than ever. "Vito, remember who you are," he said, his eyes boring into Vito's. "You are a Corleone, and the Corleones don't break," he added, his voice firm. Vito looked into the priest's eyes, and he saw the truth in his words. He was a Corleone, and he wasn't going to break. After visiting Father Malfi, Vito's spirits lifted a bit. He knew that he had the support of the church and the people of New York, and that gave him the strength to face his enemies. He fought back against the charges, and much to everyone's surprise, he won. The jury found him not guilty on all counts, and Vito was a free man, but he was a changed man. He had seen the darkness in people's hearts, and he knew that he couldn't fight it with violence. He needed something else, something more powerful. That's when he decided to go to church. Vito wasn't a religious man, but he knew that the church had something that he needed, something that could help him fight the darkness within him. And so he knelt down in the confessional and made a vow to God. He promised to do good, to help the people of New York, and to protect the church from those who would do it harm. And God heard his prayer. Vito was transformed, and he used his power and influence to do good. He helped the poor, he fought for justice, and he protected the innocent. And the people of New York loved him for it. They saw him as a hero, as a man who had risen above his past and was now using his power to help others. But his enemies weren't happy about it. They'd expected Vito to go down in flames, and they were furious that he had come out stronger than ever. They tried to fight him, but they were no match for Vito. He used his brains and his connections to outmaneuver them, and he crushed them one by one. In the end, Vito Corleone was the most powerful mob boss in New York, and he was also the most respected. He had achieved everything he had ever wanted, but he never forgot where he had come from. He never forgot the struggles he had faced, or the people who had helped him along the way. He never forgot his vow to God. So if you ever see a man walking down the street with a heavy heart, remember to be kind. You never know what battles he might be facing. And if you ever need help, remember that God is always listening. Just ask Vito Corleone, the man who entered the church in blood and left with faith. We hope you enjoyed the story of Vito Corleone. If you want to hear more stories like this, please stay tuned. Thank you for watching.